Yes.
There you go.
Thank you once again for joining our session today. Before getting into the session, I would like to proceed with this small caution. Please note the features we are discussing in this webinar are currently available in public preview, and it might change between now and its GA timeframe. We have very interesting topics today to cover. In the first half of the session, I will cover new logs data plan, which is nothing but basic logs, and also a long-term data retention, which is nothing but archival type. The second part of the session will be covered by my colleague Matt, and he covered search and restoration jobs. We have 2 demos planned and we have a lot of content to cover. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. My colleagues will help you to answer your queries. With that said, these are our learning objectives. At the end of the session, you will learn what is the new logs data plan, which is nothing but a basic logs, and how we can achieve it, and what are the native solution to archive your security data for long-term data retention, and how you can retrieve the data from the archival, and if you want to restore the data, how we can perform the restoration of your archival data into hot cache again.
Thanks, Sreedhar. This also reminded me to remind the folks that since we'll have a full coverage, as you can see, lots of materials to cover in this webinar, wanted to let folks out there know that we may not be able to verbalize the questions towards the end, so we will just take them as we go here in the chat room. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Velen. So my first topic is basic logs, a new kid in the town. Okay, so now we will learn about what is a basic logs. By default, in log analytics workspace, every table falls under analytics plan. You can configure certain tables as basic logs to reduce the cost of storing high volume, low security value data while you use for debugging, troubleshooting, and auditing, but not for analytics and alerts. Tables configured for basic logs have a lower ingestion cost in exchange for reduced features. We will talk about those limitations in next couple of minutes, but you can see you can use the basic logs for investigations and enrichment. A minute, my mouse is okay. So now we will discuss about the requirements and how to configure the basic logs. So one of the requirements is the data you can ingest into the basic logs via data collection endpoint through Azure Monitor. We can currently configure container log v2, and app traces tables to basic logs from analytics log plan using API. In order to configure the basic logs, you need to create a DCR-based custom log table in Azure Monitor, and you need to configure the data collection endpoint to generate an API endpoint or log ingestion. So we will discuss about the data collection endpoints and data collection rules. We can send the data to custom log tables using custom logs API in Azure Monitor, which is currently in preview. You need to submit a request to get it enabled in your subscriptions. One important point to be noted here, don't get confused with Data Collector API, where we are using this API to collect the events from third-party security products, and we are ingesting into the log, into the custom log tables. These tables are not qualified for basic logs. Data collection rules specify where the data should be sent and filter or transform data before before it gets ingested. It's like ingestion time transformation. In simple words, it's like a ETL pipeline: extract, transform, and load. Using the custom logs API, you can send your custom logs into the following supported tables. These are native tables. Using the custom logs API, you can ingest your custom logs into these tables. These tables are common security log, security events, syslog, and Windows events. These four native tables, as of now, we are supporting via custom logs API. So this is a simple architecture how a single data collection endpoint can support multiple data collection rules. So you can specify a different data collection rule for different sources and target tables. For example, if you, as I mentioned earlier, the data collection endpoint here, you need to create at the Azure monitor level. Once you have a data collection endpoint, you can create a DCR-based custom log table. Once you have the custom log table with any of these, either you can use the Logstash or PowerShell or REST API to ingest the events into the custom log table. So in my next slide, okay, I have a simple decision tree flow chart to help you understand how to best design your workspace with these two log data plans. That is analytics log plan and the basic logs plans. The first decision starts from, is the data which you are trying to ingest into the log analytics workspace is valuable? If the answer is yes for your question, then the next question would be, is the data required for audit purposes? And again, if your answer is yes, then the next question is this data you are ingesting into the log analytics workspace, are you trying to run analytics on top of the data? If the answer is yes, then you need to ingest into the default log data plan, which is nothing but analytics style. If the answer is no, then you can qualify them as a basic log plan. So I have given a couple of examples for the good candidates for the basic log ingestion: cloud storage logs, NetFlow logs, and VPC flow logs, and some firewall logs. These are high volume and low security data, and these can be qualified as basic logs. Coming to the differentiation between what is the analytics plan and basic tier. Tables configured with basic logs plan have a lower ingestion cost, but in exchange with some reduced feature. The key differentiation between the analytics and the basic log plan is you cannot run analytics on top of the basic logs, but you can use the basic logs for enrichments and investigation. In analytics plan, you can run the queries to get the data as much as you need. But in basic logs, for each query, there is some cost associated on data scanned. And coming to the retention ranges for the analytics log plan between 30 to 7 years. And if you use the latest archival feature, you can keep the data up to 7 years in the archive. Whereas coming to in the basic logs, the retention is 8 days. If you don't configure your archival after 8 days, by default, by definition, the data will be deleted. In analytics, you can use the full power of KQL to retrieve the data, whereas the basic logs has limited KQL. So these are a couple of additional limitations and design, and the tables that support basic logs are only the custom log tables that are ingested using data collection endpoint or data collection rules. Currently, we have container logs V1, V2, and app traces. As I mentioned earlier, the tables, the custom log tables getting created using the data collector API do not support basic logs. And coming to the querying part, data is available in the hot caching for first 8 days. After the 8 days, you can archive the data into the log analytics workspace, and each query has some cost associated with it, and it has on the amount of data it scans. As I mentioned, the basic logs has a limited KQL. So I will quickly show you one small query on my log analytics workspace. Give me a minute here. 1 minute. Let me duplicate this one. Sorry about that. So I thought it's already open, but yeah. So I will run a simple query on my basic logs, okay, to show you the differentiation between how queries run on the basic logs. This is one of my basic log, okay, tomcat_cl. And if you see under the custom logs, okay, all the basic logs has a UI differentiation. If you see here, if you see the icon for the tenable IO, this is a custom log table, but it falls under analytics log plan. By the graphical representation itself, we can identify whether it is the analytics log plan or basic log plan. For the Tomcat, the icon is different. And if you see here, it's saying that it's a basic logs. For example, as I'm running the Tomcat_cl, I got all the data. For example, if I want to use summarize on my basic logs, summarize by computer, simply computer, and if I click on run, you will see an error saying that you are querying a basic logs table and the tabular operator summarize is not supported. And somehow with the in the recent log analytics and enhancements, okay, which announced this week, you can summarize the basic logs using here. My screen is little big, so I'm not able to see all the data. So you can group here by simply drag and drop the raw groups here, okay? Once you group the data, you can simply achieve the summarize using the new design in log analytics. See here, now I am grouping or summarizing based on raw data. So this is how you can query the basic log tables, and this is how you can identify the basic logs in your log analytics workspace by small icon and UI representation. And I'm going back to my presentation here. Our next important topic is archive. All of you probably might know why retaining your security data for the long term is important. Having access to these security logs from long-term retention data store helps us query those logs in case of any security attacks, which helps to backtrace the spread and identify the impact of the threat. One of the questions we constantly get asked from the customers is long-term data retention. Is there any easy way to implement the long-term data retention? Because the data retention on LA is adding our operational cost. And another question is, can I keep the data in log analytics itself without moving my data into Azure Data Explorer or storage account? And another important question we often received from the customer is the earliest the data retention, that means workspace retention, is only 2 years, but in some parts of the world and within certain industries, it does not meet their compliance and auditing requirements because they have to keep the data up to 7 years for auditing and compliance requirements. So to answer all these concerns and the challenges, okay, we have a native solution available in log analytics workspace that's called Archive. Oh, sorry. Native solution called Archive, which supports the data can be stored up to 7 years within log analytics workspace. And you can use the archive feature for both basic logs and analytics logs. Now, let's discuss about the requirements of archive. The first requirement is, by the way, you should have the log analytics workspace. Once you have that log analytics workspace, you need to have the right permissions on the workspace because you need to configure the table level retention using this new plan. And if you have data nearing the end of its retention period, it's the best candidate to implement the archival tier. Even though if your data is not nearing its retention, still you can implement the archival. But if you want to see the immediate, the next search and restore, that would be great. And coming to the configuration part, as of now, we don't have a UI component to configure the archival for analytics and basic logs plan. But we have a good news for you. Myself and my friend Matt created two tools, one on PowerShell, another one is on workbook. The PowerShell script is used to bulk update all the tables in a single attempt, and you will see the archival plan will be applied in the quickest amount of time. But you need to run the PowerShell script either from your computer or from the Cloud Shell. Whereas coming to the next tool, we have a workbook where you can run the archival at table level, but it has to be individual table. But the advantage is your experience will be in the Azure Sentinel portal itself. The next thing is, I have given a simple calculation. It's like, it's not a big formula, but when you are trying to implement the archive, this is how the archive implemented in the backend. For example, if you are trying to apply the archival at table level, for example, your workspace, okay, I will show you in the picture, diagrammatic representation. If your workspace retention is 90 days, and if you want to keep your table for the next 3 years, then your total retention for that particular table is 3 years, 90 days. Whenever you enable Microsoft Sentinel on any log analytics workspace, by default, you will get the first 90 days of data retention for free. If you want to keep your security data more than 90 days, you can implement the archival. So, and every feature comes with its own limitations. And now I would like to discuss the limitations with archive. As I mentioned earlier, currently we are running the APIs through tools. We don't have a UI component. Okay. This is in public preview. This may change when we go to the GA. And the maximum retention of your data is 7 years. And the data that is available in archival, you cannot query the data just like the data that is available in basic or analytic tiers. So these are the current limitations of your archive. So coming back, okay, both as I mentioned, our tools are available in our official Azure Sentinel GitHub repo. I just gave the link. Okay, the first tool is a workbook for the individual table level data retention. Okay, and the second tool is PowerShell, where you want to update all the tables in a bulky way in the quickest amount of time you can run the PowerShell script. With that said, I would like to give you a demo on workbook now. Okay, let me grab the other screen here. Okay, so this is a workbook on Azure Sentinel portal. Okay, the workbook name is called Archiving Basic Logs and Retention. Here I've selected subscription and the workspace, and these are all the information you can see. For example, if you click on the basic logs, the workbook will show you what are the basic log tables that are available in your workspace. As of now, Tomcat_CL is the only one basic log table, and that retention already applied for this table. The default retention is 8 days, but I have applied 92 days. The total retention for this basic log is 100 days. And analytics logs, you will see a lot of tables here because by default, every table in log analytics workspace falls under analytics logs. So these are all different analytics logs. And if you want to see what were the tables that already archived, if you go to another tab called archive tables, okay, you can see these tables that are already applied the archival. And if you want to see unarchived tables, that means default retention tables, which you have only the workspace level retention. If you click on default retention tables, you will see all these tables. For example, another simple identification is in this grid itself. If you see the workspace retention and the total retention is having the same value, and this archive retention is showing 90. If you want to apply archive retention, you need to select a single table here and come down to the workbook, and you will see how much total retention in days you want to apply to that behavior analytics. For example, if you want to apply 400 days and click on update retention, and it will ask you, okay, if you click on update retention, the table will be updated with 400, which is nothing but the total retention is 400, but you will be charged for only 310 days. Why? Because we are subtracting 400 minus the default retention, which is nothing but free, minus 90, that is nothing but 310 days. So this is how we are calculating the total archive with our new archival type. So with that said, I am done explaining the basic logs and the archival tier. And I would like to I would like to give back the control to Matt to cover the search and the restoration jobs. Back to you, Matt.
Great job, great content there, Sreedhar. Let me go ahead and share out my screen, and if you could just give me a quick thumbs up when you're able to see that.
Looking good.
All right, perfect. So as we transition talking about how to manage where your data lies, what type of state or plan you have applied to it, you might be asking yourself, well, you know, we're putting our data into archive beyond the 2 years, to say up to 7, but we would still like to use that data. How do we do it? And this is where search comes in. So you might be asking yourself, all right, well, what's search? We can already run KQL. What's different about search versus just using KQL? And the answer is, you know, we have a new feature that works outside of KQL. It still uses KQL, but in a different way. So what is search? The purpose of search is that it's going to create a query. It's a query option that's going to scan your analytic tier, your basic tier, and your archive tier. So the 3 different tiers of your data. and is going to gather the results that are found based on a KQL query that you put in. And based on that, it's going to take those results and generate a search table that will house all of those results for you to use moving forward. So rather than running around trying to find different tables or different sources, you just can run a search job to check a table or multiple tables in the potentially in the future to find that value and that data that you might care about and bring it into one location to work with. A great thing about search jobs is that it does not share the same considerations or limitations of a regular KQL query, which I'll touch upon in the future here in a sec. And as I mentioned, a search job will use KQL like a regular query. So you can still use that KQL knowledge that you have to run a search job to grab your data and bring those results into a search table. When you should be looking at using search, it's going to be best used when you're looking to gather all events for a specific item or items from a specified table. So if I want all of my data on, say, my administrator account for my endpoints, I can run a search job on my security events table for the last year and grab all events for that admin account. This is going to allow you to run searches on all tiers of the data, like I mentioned. So if you have data in archive, data in the basic tier, we can search the other two tiers outside of just analytic tier. And as I mentioned, archive data, once it's in archive, you could still work with it through the search jobs, as I mentioned. So what are the requirements and configurations here? The requirements is that you're going to have data in your workspace, whether it be analytics tier, basic tier, or the archive tier, and you will need write permissions on the workspace. As you're generating a new table to house those results, you are going to need write permissions in order to create that table. So if you're curious if a person with read permissions can do this, they cannot. So that's one way to kind of lock down search jobs to avoid those costs. In terms of configuration, nothing needs to be configured. You do not have to turn anything on. You do not have to set up anything like a data collection endpoint or anything like that. It's just right there in Microsoft Sentinel today in a blade called search. So in order to run a search job, it's as simple as picking a table that you care about, a time frame that you want to search the data for, and key terms that you would like to look up. As I mentioned, you could do administrator account, you can do multiple accounts, multiple endpoints, IPs, file hashes for threat intelligence, and so on and so forth. So it's great to work for all types of data, all types of use cases there. Once you're done with using the search table, you can clean it up once it is no longer needed. So one great thing about search jobs is that once it creates that results table, it is going to stick around for as long as you would like. So if I wanted to, I have popular accounts that I want to track with a search job, I can create a search table for that time window for that account and keep it around and go back to it over time, rather than having to create a new search job each time that I want that data. So I just have a quick GIF here for reference for those of you who are going to look at the slides after. I'm going to skip this as I will be showing it live here on the call. So search considerations of design. In this case, as we mentioned, it is still in private or public preview, so there will be some additions over time, so it is subject to change. But currently, search results are going to be returning a maximum of 1 million rows. So comparing that with the regular KQL queries will do 30,000 rows. Search jobs can run up to 24 hours. So if you're looking to do long pulls of data on lots of data, then you can run a search job in order to have it go beyond the current blocker within KQL. At this time, search date ranges can go up to 1 year. So again, tapping into that archive data to do searches. Concurrent execution. So this is going to allow you to run 5 different search jobs per workspace at a time. So if you want to just, roll out several different search jobs on data during an event or compromise or investigation, you could do so at one time. You can do 100 search result tables per workspace. Again, I mentioned you can clean that up once you're done with them. 100 search job executions per day. If you're doing that, then that's impressive, and we would love to hear more about what you're doing. Search tables inherit the default workspace retention. So if you're looking to control how long those tables are, you can modify the table retention, but by default, it's going to take whatever retention the workspace has. Within the UI, keep in mind that the search job is going to run a query where it's going to use the specified table, and it's going to check all columns within that table for a string match with the key term that you've entered. If you're looking to do more complex KQL or multiple items, the API for search jobs does support a little bit more KQL flexibility. Lastly, at this time, searches are dedicated to one table. So if you're looking to do multi-table searches at this time, that is not supported. So highlighting again those key differences between regular KQL and search jobs. As I mentioned, a search job can run up to 24 hours versus a regular KQL query, which will time out after 10 minutes. The result capability of search jobs is 1 million rows versus the 30,000 rows. Running concurrent jobs for search jobs will not have any type of performance hit, whereas if you're running several queries at the same time in the workspace, you might experience a performance drop. While a search job is running, you can actually view partial results as they come in. So rather than waiting for that job to finish to see any results, you can actually see the number of results found so far and view them while the job is still running. Versus regular KQL, you have to wait until it's completely done to see those results. So moving on to another method for managing your data, bringing some of the data back that you might need in the event of a compromise or an audit is data restoration. So, what's the difference between search and restoration here? Well, restoration is a temporary way to rehydrate your data into your workspace in the form of a result table. So rather than running a KQL search to find results and populate the data into a table that way, you're actually just going to choose data to rehydrate into your workspace into a result table. These restore tables, or the result table, is going to be available for you to use for querying and, say, full investigations and so on. So making that data available again that you had in the past so that you can use it for, threat hunting, investigations, audits, quick lookups, anything like that. It's fully available to you with KQL functionality. When you should use it, again, great for investigations. As you are pulling in chunks of data or blocks of data based on the time range that you've specified, you're getting the full range of results and data that you have available in Archive or in your workspace in this case. So, comparing that to search, rather than trying to filter results before populating it, you're just grabbing everything so that you have everything available to you. So that's for multiple accounts, multiple entities, multiple event types, so on and so forth. Again, great for audit situations. In the event that you have an audit going on and need to prove that you have data within a specific time period, you can restore a table and show them you have that data, it's available to you, you can still work with it, and so on and so forth. In terms of requirements and configuration, again, no real configuration is required other than write permissions. And in this case, I should have put, archive so that you can maximize the value of restoration. So write permissions are needed, again, because you're creating those restore tables that you're going to be using over time, and archive so that you can go back in time and restore that data into your workspace. In terms of configuration, you're just going to select a table that you want to restore data from and a time frame for the data that you want to bring back. So this is going to range, back in time, just like search does. And again, once you're done with the table, they can be deleted via the UI when they're no longer needed. So if you're not looking to keep that data around, you can clean it up so it's not just sitting there. Again, I've provided a sample GIF here showing the process for those of you who are going to look back at the presentation. So for current restoration considerations and design, the restore job is going to require a minimum of 2 days of restoration for data. So when you're going to pick your time frame, you need to have at least 2 days worth of data within that. The restore table can support up to restoring 60 terabytes of data. If you're pulling that data in at a restoration job, that's incredible. We would love to hear what you're doing with that. You can run up to 4 restores per week within your workspace. So if you're hitting that, we would love to hear what your use case is. You can run up to 2 restored processes in the workspace at the same time. So if you're looking to do 2 tables at the same time to maximize efficiency, that is available to you. You can run only 1 active restore on a specific table at a given time. So what that means is if you're looking to, say, run a restore job on the same table twice, you will need to clean up the old one before creating the new one. And restore tables cannot be archived. So if you're looking to create subgroups of your data within a restore table, you are not able to set that to be archived at this time. So comparing search and restore, as you might be thinking, okay, they sound pretty similar. So to distinguish between the two, when you run a search job, it's going to be based on the KQL query that you inserted to get the data. So it's only going to return matching data based on that query that you've inserted. When it restores that data in a table, it's going to have a suffix of search at the end of it, and that data is re-ingested into the workspace. 1 million row limit, again, on the search table, but with search jobs, you do not have a limit per week. And multiple search jobs can be performed on the same table at the same time. But when looking at restore, you can restore all data from a table without having to rely on a query to find matching results. When a restore table is created, it's going to have the suffix of restore at the end of it, and it is not re-ingested into your workspace. Rather than 1 million rows, it can handle up to 60 terabytes. But you do have that limit of 4 restorations per week on the workspace, and only 1 restore job can be performed on a table at a time. So let's move on to a quick user story demo. So I'm going to bring over my portal here. So I say I'm a security analyst, and earlier, Sreedhar had shown you, how you can set the retention of your tables and your data on a workspace, and how to modify if a specific table is ingested into the analytic tier or the basic log tier plan. So for context, I have a basic log table called Tomcat that I'll be showing off. And let's say I'm going in to evaluate my incidents for the day. So I know that one of our employees, Jeff L, seems to keep getting hacked and doing suspicious behavior. So I'm going to go look at Jeff L. So typing Jeff into the search, you can see that he's got quite a few incidents just from the last 24 hours. And I can go ahead and click on his name, go down a few, but I know from the past that he's had a common IP address show up in the data. So I know that Jeff is one of our network device administrators. And so I want to make sure that his account is not being used to log into our network devices to perform malicious acts. So what I can do is go to a search job, and since I have Tomcat logs being ingested into basic tier, and I don't want to necessarily try to find all of that data, whether it be archived or in basic or in analytic, I can actually just come here and say, okay, within the last year, I want all of my Tomcat data for Jeff L. And I know that he particularly uses a workstation called Workstation 13. And I can create that search job. So I've already kicked off a search for Workstation 13 in my Tomcat data. So this is going to extend over the last year, ranging from our analytic tier, basic tier, and archive tier. And as this is running, I can actually leave and come back without this being impacted. So for example, I already generated a search job for my Tomcat logs, looking for the IP that I know was associated with one of Jeff's compromises. So I can actually click View Search Results. And I can go into the table here. So here are my search job results in my table that I can work with now. So I can already see here that Jeff's account in this case has been used to log into our Tomcat devices and was doing some actions on April 4th and coming from that IP address that was found in the compromise. So rather than me going and digging through all of our network logs, I can see now, okay, I see that this IP address was used in some of our network devices, go back, and I now want to also search for that IP and say our sign-in logs. Were they using that IP on Jeff's account to also get into Azure AD or any of our other devices? So again, I'm going to limit that, say, to we'll just leave it to the last year, kick that off again. So that now I'm showing off I can run concurrent jobs at the same time with no impact hit. I also left and came back, and you can see, even though this is still running, it's going to actually show me my number of results that I have showing up over time. So, jumping ahead, let's say, we do find that, oh, there you go. So here's an example of partial results. So even though the job is still running, I found over 1,200 results of activity within the last year for that workstation. So if I wanted to use that in my investigation, I could. But let's jump ahead and say that that IP address is showing up in our sign-in logs, and we want to see exactly when that's happening. So going back from, like, say, June, I can delete that table, I can generate a new one, or looking at our security events from November, trying to get some ranges on exactly when this activity was taking place, we can create a restore table. In this case, I'm going to click Restore and go ahead and choose my Tomcat, because I can see, since it isn't basic, it's only 8 days of retention. So beyond that 8 days, I don't have that visibility at this time outside of a search job. But if I wanted to restore that data at the same time, I can go ahead and create a search job. So today is April 7th. So I will say the full month leading up to April, I want that data back. Go ahead and click Restore. So again, that's going to create that restoration table. So I'll have that data available to me again outside of the search job and search results if I wanted to. And I can work with that through my investigation. Now you might be wondering, okay, so we have results. How do I use that in the investigation? So even though basic logs do not support detections and analytic rules, I can still use basic logs and search results in a bookmark for an investigation. So if I click that checkbox, click Add Bookmark, it's going to pull it up, and I can just associate it with some MITRE tactics here. So they're doing some actions and making some changes. You can see that my search job has completed, doing some executions again, and create. So if I wanted to, I can create this bookmark associated with my ongoing investigations, escalate it to an incident if I wanted to, and so on and so forth. So showing off that that enrichment or the investigation aspect of both search and the basic log tier. So to get into the popular topic of pricing, we haven't mentioned any of it up until now, so let me go ahead and start breaking that down. And while I'm doing this, any of the Microsoft moderators wants to link the Azure Monitor pricing page, Azure or Microsoft Sentinel pricing page, and the pricing calculator, our viewers can follow along with the pricing details that I'm going to be going over. So focusing on basic logs first, we've talked about it being that new option for cheaper ingestion and having that lower retention, but the cost benefit, is there. So what you're looking at right now, if you were to bring in basic logs into both Azure Log Analytics and Microsoft Sentinel, is rather than paying the, say, $4.40 for both of them, you are now only paying $1. So right there alone, without going into commitment tiers, you are getting, a $3 or more cost benefit in cost saving. But that we did mention that there is a cost to running a query. So what does that look like? That is going to be 0.005 cents per gig scanned. So if you're running small queries, that is still going to generate a small amount. But even if you're running queries against terabytes of data, that's still not that large. But it is something that you have to keep in mind when running basic log queries. But in the event that you're not running queries very often or at all, you don't have to worry about that. Moving on to Archive. As Sreedhar had mentioned, Archive goes up to 7 years at this time, and your cost for that is going to be 2 cents per gig ingested and kept in Archive per month. So if you're looking for that low cost Archive model storage, this is a great option for that. And it is, comparable to, say, the storage account option, as you no longer have to do the data export, you no longer have to manage the storage account or Azure Data Explorer as the data does not leave Azure Log Analytics. Looking at search jobs, again, it's going to be that 0.005 cents per gig scanned for a search job. So even if you're doing terabytes of data scanned, you're still paying that low cost to bring that data back and reuse it for your use cases or your events that are taking place. Whereas restore is going to be the 10 cents per gig per day for the table, as it you bring it back and you keep it. So our recommendation for that, based on the cost model, is going to be quick in and out. Restore your data. Once you're done using it, remove it so that you're not incurring those costs over time without knowing it. So we have a note here about minimum daily charge for 2 terabytes, or in 12 hours in this case. So that's going to roughly be about $96, but it is prorated hourly. So even if you delete the table halfway through the day, it is prorated. So there is that cost difference between search job and restore, but both are available to you when you need it as you go along over time. So and highlighting the data retention here, we talk about 2 years maximum in the Log Analytics workspace, 7 years in Archive. Keep in mind that you do get that full KQL functionality and 90 days included out of the box with Microsoft Sentinel. So you only have to worry, about Archive costs after the 90 days or however long you have your retention set on the workspace. So one note to keep in mind is that at this time, for search and restore in the public preview phase, there are no charges applied during the preview period. So as long as the feature set for search and restore is in public preview, there will be no cost associated to you using it. So we recommend you start getting familiar with it now, start using it, start building those workflows for those features in your security operations, and take advantage of that no cost model moving forward. So with that, we come to the end of our content with 5 minutes to spare. We did include some learning materials. So if you're looking to find the public documentation around the features that we covered today or the pricing, we do have documents for those, and as well as the pricing model with the pricing calculator. So if you're looking to do cost estimations and comparisons, we highly recommend using the Azure pricing calculator to see exactly how much is going to cost based on what you're looking at doing. So with that, I'll pass it back to the hosts of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Matt and Sreedhar. And as As given the heads up at the beginning, we have lots of material, as you could see, to cover, and we are reaching here the end. Most of the questions were answered via the IM, and I see Sreedhar is taking care of one of them. Perhaps we can verbalize the very last one here. Are all data tables and types migrated to data archive at the end of the main LA retention period?
That is a great question and a great clarifying question. So you will need to configure your tables for archive. It is not enabled automatically. So we talked a bit about the PowerShell script that was built. We talked about the workbook. I believe they're also working on a policy, if it's not available already today, to do the automation for setting that configuration. But rather than it be turned on automatically, we allow the users to specify which tables they want to be archived.
Thank you, Matt. And at the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure that you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements, like I mentioned at the beginning, we kicked off our newsletter earlier this morning, which contains lots of information about our upcoming summer edition webinars. And please visit our landing page for that information at aka.ms/security community. And while you're there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content, which in fact pertains also to what Matt and Sreedhar shared with us today. You'll find the bite-sized videos, the ninja trainings, the GitHub communities, and more. Also, just a quick reminder that we would love to hear your feedback on how we can improve on these webinars. And you can participate by submitting a feedback at our aka.ms/security webinar feedback site. Thank you again, and see you next time. Have a good one.